All right, today we're going to talk about the uranium trap. We are cracking open a story that's unfolding, right now, mostly out of sight. And it connects the world of artificial intelligence to this really high-stakes standoff in the global energy market. So let's just dive right in.
Okay, so here's the deal. Underneath everything you know, our day-to-day lives, there's this massive squeeze happening. It's a huge structural crisis for the very energy that powers our world. And honestly, most people have no clue it's even going on. The key players, they are locked in a trap. And believe me, the consequences could be enormous.
And you know what? It all kicks off with a question that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction, but it is now a very real economic reality. I mean, we all know AI is changing everything, right? But what does its incredible hunger for processing power actually consume? Well, the answer is leading us straight into this trap. All right, Section 1, the AI power dilemma. We're talking about the insatiable demand for 24/7 power.
So here's the thing about AI. Those data centers, they just can't afford to shut down when the sun sets or, when the wind stops blowing. They need constant, super stable 24/7 energy. That's what we call base load power. And this is a job that renewables, for all their amazing benefits, just aren't designed to do by themselves.
And the sheer scale of the shift, it's just staggering. I mean, look at this. The International Energy Agency says that the demand for electricity is growing 2.5 times faster than the demand for all other energy combined. This is not some gentle curve, folks. It is an explosive acceleration, and it's all being driven by technology and data.
So where are utilities turning to get this reliable, carbon-free baseload power? Well, they're turning to nuclear. In fact, projections are showing that by 2025, nuclear power generation is going to hit an all-time record. It's becoming the bedrock solution for this new digital economy. But, and this is a big but, this solution has a critical vulnerability.
Okay, next up, the uranium black hole. This is where a financial player completely changes the game. So this new player is called the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust. It's a special kind of fund, a closed-end fund that really only does one thing. It buys physical pounds of uranium right off the open market and just locks them away. It's not like a typical ETF that you trade back and forth. This thing is designed to acquire and hold. And its mechanism is so unique, they actually call it the black hole effect. Here's how it works. When investors buy shares in the trust, Sprott takes that cash and immediately goes out and buys physical uranium. That uranium then goes into a vault, and for all practical purposes, it's just gone. There's no easy way for it to ever come back onto the market. It's a one-way street. So how much are we talking about? The scale of this operation is just wow. By early 2026, projections show the Sprott Trust will be holding nearly 79 million pounds of uranium. And that's real, physical material that's been completely removed from global circulation. Now, to put that number into perspective, the entire world's fleet of nuclear reactors, they consume about 180 million pounds a year. So Sprott has single-handedly taken almost half a year's worth of global supply and just locked it in a vault. This is a fundamental, game-changing shift to the entire supply landscape.
Okay, part 3, a decade of neglect. Or how utilities basically created their own crisis. So this wasn't some sudden shock to the system. No, this was a slow-motion crisis that's been over a decade in the making. See, starting way back in 2013, utilities began this really dangerous pattern. For 13 straight years, they consistently bought less new uranium than their reactors were actually burning. They just figured, we can always buy more later.
And that's consistent deficit is the key. You have to understand, for 13 consecutive years, utilities have contracted less uranium than they actually burned. Year after year, the industry was running a fuel deficit, slowly but surely just draining its reserves. It was a massive gamble that the market would always be there for them when they needed it. The simplest way to think about it is this. They were eating out of the pantry instead of going to the grocery store. And for years, yeah, it worked. But now, after more than a decade of doing this, the pantry is pretty much empty. The cupboards are bare.
And this is the moment where it all comes together. The trap is sprung. It's the perfect storm.
So let's just recap how these forces collide. First, AI's hunger for power means utilities absolutely must keep their reactors running. No choice. But their own terrible planning means they're out of fuel. So what do? They're forced to go to the short-term spot market for an emergency supply, only to find that financial players like Sprott have already swept up all the available easy-to-move pounds.
This creates a textbook economic nightmare scenario. You have a perfectly inelastic buyer. All that means is the utility has to buy the fuel to avoid a shutdown. Price is no object. They don't have a choice. And they're now facing a market where the supply they so desperately need has basically vanished.
And that leads us to the final, and maybe the most shocking part of this story. It's the twist that really reveals the true nature of this trap. You might think this is all about the price of uranium going up, but the crazy truth is, the price of uranium barely even matters to a utility.
I mean, just take a look at the operating costs of a nuclear power plant. The uranium fuel itself, it only accounts for about 5 to 10% of the total budget. The vast majority of their costs are things like staffing, security, maintenance, capital. The fuel is just a tiny little slice of the pie.
And the implication of this is just profound. Think about it. If the price of uranium doubles, say from $100 to $200 a pound, the final cost of the electricity they sell to you and me barely moves. The impact on their overall business is minimal. And this is the absolute core of it right here. Because while the cost of the fuel is small, the cost of a blackout, of shutting down a multi-billion-dollar nuclear reactor, is infinitely higher. It's politically and financially catastrophic. So it all comes down to this. When a utility is staring down a potential shutdown, there's effectively no ceiling on what they will pay for the uranium they need to stay online. $150, $200, $300? Price becomes an afterthought. Survival is literally everything. Which leaves us with one final, pretty unsettling question. If utilities will pay any price, in a market where the supply they need is locked away, what is the limit?